Mercedes has a new AMG S63 coming. It's the most powerful S-Class of all time, and also maybe the most aggressive looking. Let's dive into the details. On the side, there's not a whole lot to differentiate the S63 from a typical S-Class. We do have this E-Performance badge on the side and a little bit of carbon fiber running all along the bottom here. But probably the biggest differentiator here is the optional 21-inch wheels that this car is rolling on, backed by carbon ceramic brakes, which also will be an option on the S63. The more important stuff, though, is a little bit harder to see. Every S63 will have Mercedes active suspension, which also has adaptive ride height, so if you're going at high speed, the car can lower itself by 10 millimeters for better aerodynamics. Also underneath there, we've got Mercedes active anti-roll bars, which can completely disconnect themselves on bumpy roads and also on the highways to make sure that you've got the typical incredibly smooth S-Class ride that you would expect, even on the most sporty S-Class that you can get. And there's also active engine mounts up front too, which again keep the ride soft and smooth. And finally, every S63 will have active rear axle steering, up to 3 degrees of steering. That's a little less than you can get on the normal S-Class, but that's because we've got bigger wheels and tires, and also all the hybrid stuff at the back. But really the more important and interesting stuff in terms of the visual differentiation is up front on the nose. From the front, the new S63 looks unlike any other S-Class that's come before. We've got a much more aggressive front end, starting with, for the first time, no standing star in an S-Class. We've got the AMG logo here on the hood and the big star logo up front. Now this actually is presenting the radar sensor is hidden behind this sensor, but in addition to this, we've got cameras all around as well, and also a LiDAR sensor, which will give us some semi-autonomous driving level 3 stuff, which we'll talk about a little bit more once we get inside. But beyond that, we've got this big aggressive grille with carbon fiber intakes and blacked out chrome that gives this thing a really mean aggressive look that's continued on the interior with a lot of carbon fiber in there too. On the inside of the S63, you have all the same luxury appointments that you would come to expect from the modern S-Class. In the back seat, you can get the rear seat infotainment experience if you want to, fold down tables, your champagne cooler, all the normal things that you'd like on an S-Class. Up front, again, much the same as before. We've got a little bit different quilting pattern on the seats here, and of course the AMG logos are embossed on the back as well, instead of the typical comfy pillows that you get in an S-Class. And of course, being an AMG, it wouldn't be an AMG without some carbon fiber somewhere, and so we've got a lovely dash of that stuff too. In the front of me, though, I've got an AMG Sport steering wheel, which is different than the normal S-Class. I can turn these knobs down here to toggle between the 7 different driving modes that are available on the S63. There's one fewer than on the C63 because there's no track mode. Mercedes does not expect people with an S63 to actually go to the track, so no race mode here. We've got Sport, Sport Plus, Rain, and of course all the customizable modes that you would want. You can also individually change your suspension and the engine exhaust note on the left with a separate note. We've got shift paddles on the back and custom interfaces in the MBUX center entertainment system, as well as behind the steering wheel with the gauge cluster, and also from the heads-up display, showing you things like where your power is coming from, how much is coming from the electric motors, how much is coming from that big V8 up front, and when you're recharging the battery and everything else. And finally, we've got 2 new buttons on the steering wheel, which are quite interesting. Hold these 2 down, and that engages the level 3 driver assistance system. At that point, the car starts to rely on those sensors we talked about up front, the LiDAR, the radar, and all the cameras that are embedded into the S63 to give you really advanced level 3 driving assistance, at least on the highway when this comes to market. Now, when will the S63 come to market? Mercedes says to expect it sometime around the second half or the later half of 2023. Price, not determined yet, but as ever with these things, if you have to ask, right? Now, powering the hybrid portion of that equation is a new 13.1 kilowatt-hour battery pack that sits here in the back close to that rear-mounted electric motor. Now, that does provide a little over 30 kilometers of all-electric range, and interestingly, despite the fact that the motor is mounted on the rear axle, it can actually power the front axle too, giving this full all-wheel drive even in electric mode. But this car really isn't designed for long-range EV driving. It's really designed for quick charging and quick discharging, giving you a lot of power when you want to accelerate and a lot of regeneration when you get back on the brakes. But that battery pack and the hybrid system does come with some compromises. This car weighs about 400 kilos more than the outgoing car, but perhaps more significantly, we've lost some trunk space too. Look in the back here, and the width is about the same, but the floor is significantly higher than the outgoing S-Class. So while it'll certainly swallow a weekend's worth of luggage with no problem, got a little bit less room than before. Hopefully it won't be too long before Mercedes lets us drive the new S63 and find out for ourselves if that cost is going to be worth it. But until then, we want to know what you think. Is that new, more aggressive front end enough to differentiate the AMG from the normal S-Class? And will the extra power and handling make up for the extra weight from that hybrid system? Let us know down in the comments. Make sure you like and subscribe, and check back for our full impression soon.